equity in the way in which we fund our public schools. However, changing the dynamics, I guess, of how that funding flows, this measure will take what is now considered a 3-year look back and shrink that timeline to ultimately 7 months worth of data. Where we feel like this might be the biggest challenge is that it disrupts the stability for that school district. We know that we are in a national teacher shortage. Oklahoma leads the crisis with the lack of educators that are currently certified and in our classrooms. And this particular measure, in my opinion, will actually make that increasingly worse. Not having stable understanding of how the budget will work will force school districts to right size their teaching staff, and that will ultimately lead to larger class sizes. So we know that our school districts are operating on very lean budgets as it currently is. 80% of that goes to the hard costs there in the district. Those are not going to change. And so by reducing the amount of funding that is available, this will ultimately reduce the either amount of teachers that they're able to employ there on site, or will actually make them have to take a critical eye to extracurriculars and enriched opportunities that our school districts have worked so hard to secure over the last 3 to 4 years. So with that, I'll yield to another colleague who has also spent a significant amount of time in the classrooms as a school counselor, Senator Mary Boren.
Thank you. I'm Senator Mary Boren from Norman, Oklahoma. Today, the House bill passed with plenty of votes. It wasn't even really that close of a vote. And what we see when it comes to education policy in Oklahoma, there's a disparity of power. Our policies do not reflect balanced and strategic decision making. In the same way that this bill destabilizes school funding, it also reflects an instability in decision making. In my debate, I used the example of a tug of war and two groups on one end of the rope tugging against each other, and which side had the most power. And we see that throughout Oklahoma, educators were wholeheartedly against this from top to bottom. State superintendent of public instruction that has been elected 2 elections in a row and has served the state very dutifully was clearly against this. We've had local chambers of commerce that was against this bill. We had educators through every zip code in the state was against this bill, and parents of 600,000 public school students were against this bill. But despite those overwhelming voices, they still didn't have enough power to stop this destabilizing initiative in the middle of recovering from a pandemic. And I think it's important for all Oklahomans to ask themselves, why weren't those voices enough? And what can we do to regain balance and have focus on Oklahoma priorities? And when we can figure that out, then our schools will be fully funded. And I look forward to helping Oklahomans reach that goal. Okay. So next, we have Senator Joanna Dossett from Tulsa, and she's also came from the classroom as well in Tulsa. So I'd like to turn it over to Senator Joanna Dossett.
Thank you, colleagues. My name is Senator Joanna Dossett. I represent State Senate District 35 in Tulsa. I recently completed 15 and a half years of teaching in the classroom before I resigned so that I could serve in the State Senate. What we saw today on the floor of the State Senate was deeply affecting and disturbing to many of us because, as you've heard from my colleagues who went before me, we've had a groundbreaking policy shift just be passed in the Senate without collaboration of any professional educator stakeholder group in the state. during the development and the legislative process of this bill. So I'll repeat what Senator Boren said. Our elected state superintendent of public education is not for this bill. The Association of School Administrations, not for this bill. The Association of Local School Boards, not for this bill. And we learned that through the bill author's own admission on the floor, that these groups were not included, not consulted in the process, and that they ultimately were not in agreement with this, like we said before, groundbreaking policy shift that will affect public education deeply into the future. One thing that my colleagues and I have experienced over the last month or so is also an outpouring of opposition to this bill, not from the professional educator associations that we were just speaking of, but from parents of students in our Oklahoma public schools. I've received hundreds of emails and phone calls against this bill, not a single one for it. And what we see here is we have all of the professional organizations and then all of the parents of children in Oklahoma public schools not for this bill. And I'll go back to some of the author's language from the floor. When presented with all of that information and asked about it on the floor, the author said, well, sometimes we're simply not going to agree. And I'm going to wrap back around to what I said before. This is a deeply affecting and disturbing incident that we've all seen play out this morning, in that because powers that be simply don't want to agree with every voice that's crying out in opposition to this bill, we've passed this policy in the state Senate. It's on its way to the governor, and it could become the law against the will of almost everyone in the state. So with that, I will end. We in the Senate Democratic Caucus will continue our push forward to support education in every single way that we can. We will not sit down or back down from these groundbreaking policies that occur without input of folks who are affected, and without some type of collaboration or action in concert, so that we can come to a better outcome for our Oklahoma students and their families.
So we're available for questions. Carmen, Kaylin, if you all have any questions.
I don't have any. I think that 2-hour floor debate covered a lot of them.
I hope so. Caitlin, do you have anything?
Oh, no, I was just here to listen. Thank you, though.
Okay. All right. You don't have anything else? Thank you, Carmen, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks.